Hello and welcome to this video, and I'm going to be continuing from the last couple of videos. The first one I kind of wrote the start of the API, so we could use Postman to post in the form data to be able to sign up to whatever website we're going to be putting this in, and that would save the data into the MySQL tables. I'll show you that now. I've got Postman here, and I'm going to localhost 4000, which is where this app is running, and I'm posting to API account and sign up, and then I've got an email, first name, last name, and then passwords, just this is a test. And I'm going to click send on that, and that will give us a response saying, okay, it's got no errors, and the data it's giving back is a token. So we can now see that this works. I did all of that in the first two videos, and I also extracted a load of the database stuff and abstracted it all to a file so I could use it in any future modules. But in this video, we're going to carry on, and we're basically going to carry on building a bit more of the API for sort of account functionality, which means sort of getting a token. So, for example, someone wants to sign into the site, they'll pass their email address and password over, and you'll want to be returned a token. So let's do that one next. That's the next place to go. So I'm going to expect a post request from that. So I'm going to do router.post, and this one will be, because it will be /API/account. So this one I want to be get token. And then we're going to have an async function, which will be res and request, request and res for request and response. And basically we're going to be getting in our request there, we're going to be getting the email address and the password. So we want to make sure that we've got those. So I want to get the fields out. So I'm going to do var user data, same as I did in the sign up one here. Var user data equals request.fields. I'm going to type it again just for good measure. Equals request.fields. So we're going to get all the fields through there, and then we'll say user data dot email equals user data dot email, or nothing if there isn't anything there. I'm going to say user data dot password equals user data dot password, or nothing. So then what we're looking for is we need to find the ID of any user that has an email address. And that's quite simple to do because I abstracted all the database stuff, so we don't need to do a lot to do that. So I can say var user ID equals await, because we want it to wait to do something. DDF get single value. The query for this will be select ID from users where email equals question mark. And then we're going to pass that in the parameter of that, which will be user data dot email. So now we've got the user ID back. Now what happens? I'm just going to do. I'm going to return this to the browser or Postman. So res.send. I'm just going to send back the user ID, and we can now go to here. Create a new request, which I'm going to do as a post. I'm going to make that API account sign up, but instead of why didn't that work? I have to click on it. Can't tab to it. Get token. The headers I'm going to ignore, and the body I just want to add in some form data. So I'm going to email and tests. I'm going to put in the what was it? I did the spuds. What was it? Spuds at 2020rendezvous.com. Okay, so I'm going to add this in here, and I'm going to put in the password. For now, I'm just going to put in any old crap. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to click send, And we are getting back 1 because if I go to users here, well, we should be getting back 10. So what's gone wrong there? I'll tell you what's gone wrong there. 1 second. Because we're getting a single value, I have to actually name the column as val so that it knows what it's going to get. I may change that at a later date. I may sort of get it to just get the first one. But for now, that's the way this is working. So let's run that again. Oh, we seem to have a bug. So yeah, I wanted to pass a string to that, solve that problem. But we are getting the user ID out. Now, what happens here if I screw this email address up? We're going to cause an error because cannot read property val of undefined. So if we go to here, we realize down here where it's saying data.val default value, it can't actually read the val because it's undefined. Data is undefined. So what we need to do here is say, is the data undefined? We need to say data equals data, question mark, or just an empty object. So now this here should work. So what's happened here is we've got this cannot read property toString of undefined, because even though all of this now works and we've got here data equals data or an empty object, it's still returning nothing. It's still returning a null or an undefined. And the reason that is because we're getting this single value, but of course there is no value to come back. So even though it goes through all of this, we've got data equals data or nothing, and then we've got that or default value. Now default value is also undefined. So this is why I put the default value into this function get single value. So we can do (0), and then this will return 0 if it can't find a value. So I now rerun that and go send. And we now get 0 back because it hasn't found a user ID. So this is the reason why I wanted this, this override, this default value within this function. So obviously we don't want to send back that user ID really. We just want to see whether the user ID exists. So now we can say if user ID is bigger than 0, then we want to, or we want to say if the user ID equals 0, should I say, then we want to return an error. So we're going to do ddf.resSend, which I wrote in the last video. This abstracts the sending of back of data. So I need to send the res object through, the response object through. I'm not going to send any data with that at all. The status will be, again, I abstracted this away, res statuses dot error, and then the error will be incorrect email or password. It's important not to send too much information back, because if you send back incorrect email, then you'd be letting them know that an account doesn't exist with that email. And then if you sent through an email and a password and sent back something saying incorrect password, what you'd end up with is letting them know that there is an account with that, but the password's wrong. And you could sort of give away the fact that a user exists in your database or not. So I like to send back a neutral, wherever possible, a neutral sort of a neutral message so that people can't glean too much information. I know that's not always possible, but wherever possible, try to be thoughtful of stuff like that. So I'm actually going to put in a little bit of validation up here as well. So I'm going to say, because after that, the send there, I just need to return false. So we exit the function. But I'm just going to copy this code here and put it up here, and I'm just going to check that the email actually validates. So if the email doesn't validate, so we need to do validate email, and we need to send through user data.email. then we need to say invalid email because it's not even an email address. So we're not giving them anything there. They haven't even passed an email address. And that will send the error for that one. And then it'll exit, so it won't continue after that. And we're going to do the same here with if there's no password. So if password, user data, sorry, dot password, and I'm also going to, no, I'm not going to do anything with that. So that's use data password equals nothing. Then we're going to say must supply password. I've got an extra bracket there, which I don't want to have. So that just validates that we have an email address and we have a password. Otherwise, it's going to just kick us out. So at this point, we assume we have got an email address, and here we've checked that the email address does actually exist within the database. So we now have a user ID. I'm also going to put one more thing here in this get single value. I'm going to say where I'm going to add something onto the where. So it'll be the status has to be under 2. Because if you remember from the last video, we said status 0 is a confirmed user, status 1 is someone that hasn't confirmed their account, and status 2 is someone that might be deleted or suspended or whatever, any of the codes above there. So we want to make sure it's 0 or 1 to allow them to get the token. So we're going to have where status is under 2 add email. So obviously if they're deleted, they might have an email address within the system, but we're still going to return the 0 because it will just come back with incorrect email or password. So now I'm going to look up the sort. We now need to get the sort. If you remember in the first video, when we created the account, it creates a random string which knows the sort, and then it puts that together with the password, and then it hashes it. And we have a copy of this hash and we have a copy of the sort, but what we don't have is their password. But we do now because they've submitted it, or at least we've hoped they've submitted the right one, but we need to get the sort out first. So again, we're going to use this this database abstraction I did in the last video. So we're going to say var sort equals await ddf.get single value. We're going to do select sort from sorts where user ID equals, and then we're going to put the user ID in there. And of course, we can put that in user ID as a parameter, as the only value in that array. And again, I'm going to pass through a default value. So it will come back as nothing if there's no sort at all. Which there should be. I mean, every user will be given a sort, otherwise they won't be in the database. But I want to give it a default value anyway. And then we basically need to create the hash now. So I'm going to say var hash equals, is it an await function? I can't remember. No, it wasn't. It was just a get hash. Hash. I need to say select sort as val because it's a single column, single item that I want. So I need to say hash equals get hash, and then the password is going to be user data.password, and the sort is going to be the sort. And we should now have the hash, and now we can compare that hash to the one in the database. So I can say var db hash equals, and then we can do await ddf.get single value value select pw hash as val from users where id equals, and then we'll add in the user ID as a parameter. And if the password hash doesn't come back with anything, we'll just leave it as empty because it should come back with something. By this point, there should be we know that the user ID is valid up here, so it will come back with something. But if not, it will just come back as empty. And then, of course, we know it can't match this hash because this hash here will have some data in it, even if it's just one character in the password. In fact, we could say if userdata.password dot length is under 8, then must apply a password. Because we said in the last video it has to be at least 8 characters. So if the user data is under 8, then obviously it's not a proper password. So we'll be definitely passing that, and even if the sort was empty, we're passing something through, and then that will give us a hash which, you know, won't match the hash in the database because that would have actually been generated with the sort that we created. So we're going to get back the DB hash, and we're going to compare the two. So we're going to say if hash equals DB hash, then we want to return a token at this point. So we want to do get token, create token, sorry. So we'll do var token equals await create token, and we want to pass it the user ID because at this point our hashes match, and then we want to return the token as the ddf res.send. So we'll do ddf.res send, and I send it the response object, and then all I'm going to do is send it the data, which is just token, because the OK and all the other stuff will be sorted out in the function. I already did that in the last one. If you don't supply them, it will just give the token in a JSON object, which is what we want. And then I can return false here because we're done at this point. We've got the token. And obviously if hash doesn't equal the DB hash, then we get down to here. And then at this point, I want to copy this here where we respond with an error. And I want to say incorrect email or password. Same error again. Quite happy with that. So let's see if it works. So if I go over to here and I click send, invalid email, which makes sense. So I go back to here and I go send. Incorrect email or password, which is right. What was my password on here? It was, oh, sorry, not on there. This tab here. This is a test. All right, let's put that in. And then this should give us back a token, which is exactly what we're looking for because that's logged us in. If I leave this password blank, must supply a password, which is right. If I leave this email blank, invalid email, which is correct. So how can I go back on that? Yeah, I can undo that. Undo. No, you can't. All right. So spuds@2020rendezvous.com, and this is a test. So we get this token through, which is what we're looking for. Now we want to be able to turn that token into an ID. So on future requests that the app might want to do, you need to be able to say, hey, I've got this token. What user ID is it? So what I want to do is create a function. So I'm going to say function get user ID from token. And then we're going to take in the token. And we're going to return a user ID. I'd imagine this will be async. And then what we're going to do under here is we're going to say exports dot router. Not dot router. Get user ID from token equals get user ID from token. And then this way, when we import this account module into other modules, we'll be able to use this get user ID from token function, which is fantastic. So for this, really, I just need to go to the tokens table and look up that the token is in there and return the user ID. And if the user ID isn't in there, then we want to return a 0. So I'm going to do var user ID equals await ddf dot get single value. I'm going to do select user ID as val, because it's the single item, from tokens where token equals, and then we're going to put in the question mark, and then I want to pass in the token so that it fills that question mark in with the token, and the default user ID I want to get is 0. So, and then we're going to return that like that. Now I can use this here in any function I want to do. So if I want to, for example, say router dot change name, so I'll do post change name, for example. We'll write a simple function, and then we'll do request and response. And in this function here, we're going to be able to take a new first name and a new last name. I won't actually end up doing this in the way that we implement account changes, but it's a good example. So let's assume that the validation is all done and we're quite happy with the fact that the stuff's coming in. In fact, I can probably just copy it from here anyway. So let me just copy that bit there and put that there. So we've got here, if I get rid of that, I get rid of the email. I'm not interested in any of that. So what I want to actually do here is check the token. So I'm going to do var token equals request.header dot token, which is going to be our token variable that we're getting from the header. If this doesn't equal anything, so we're going to do token dot equals token or nothing, which is perfectly reasonable. So I'm going to say var user ID equals await get user ID from token. I'm going to pass it in that token, and we should now get back the user ID. As long as it's a valid user ID, it won't be 0. So if user ID is equal to 0, then we have problems. So I then want to send back an error, which I will just copy this res.send and everything from up here, put that in there, and then write in here invalid token. Now, what would be nice is if all of this stuff here happened in a function, because this is going to happen all over the app, loads and loads. So I'm going to make a function here which basically wraps up some of that. So async function check token. So I'm just going to call it check token, which is a smaller. And I'm going to put in there token, and we also want to have the request and the request and the response, response. And now I'm going to basically cut all of this and put that in there. So we go check token, and this will get in the request, the response, and the token, and it will go through all of that. And if the user ID equals 0, then we're going to return false. If not, we're going to return user ID. And then this way, this will write the response out. We don't have to worry about any of that. And again, I'm going to do the same as I did down here. I'm going to say exports dot check token equals check token, so that can be called by other modules. So up here now in this change name, I can say check token, and I can pass it the request and the response. object, and I can also pass it the, well actually I don't need to pass it the token. What am I talking about? Because we get the token from the request object. So that's all done for us. So all I need to do is var user ID equals check token, await check token, and then if the user ID comes back as 0, in fact I'm going to return 0 on that, not false, and then we can just say if user ID equals 0, then we want to return false because we've already done our response. So now just 2 lines at the top of each function, we want to check that we're signed in, and we get the user ID back and handle any invalid tokens. So now we come down to this bit, we've got a new first name and last name that we might want to put in. I can go up here. I said I wasn't going to do this, but I will do anyway. So I'm going to validate the first name and the last name. Okay, so I'm going to put that in here. We will create some errors. Var errors is an empty array. And then we want to send an error as we did before. If the errors, so we need to say if errors.length is nothing, then we basically want to change the username and password and return false. But obviously if they aren't equal to nothing, then we want to return this error thing here, which is which will be this array with whatever we put in it from this validation here. So now all we've got to do is basically change the name, and I'm going to use the db query function here to do this because it returns just the first bit of the data, but we don't really care about the return. We just want it to execute the query with the parameters. So all I'm going to do in this is say await ddf.db query. I'm going to put in there update users, set first name equal to that, comma, last name equal to question mark, where ID equals question mark. And then we need to pass it 3 parameters, which will be user data dot first name, user data dot last name, and user ID, which is what we extracted here. So yeah, this here will update the data based on, so basically where the user ID is that, it's going to set the first name and the last name, and then return false, which means we've actually got to send an OK message just to say everything worked out. So I'll do ddf.resend, and I need to send the response object over, and again, usually I'm not going to give it any particular data. It can just be OK. So actually, I'm going to say ddf.resend, and that will just send an OK message. So this should now, if I go to, for example, the users table here, you'll see I've got my user ID is 10, Spuds 22, and I've got that. So let's say I want to change that to a different name, David Fowler. I'm going to change that to something different. I need to go to create another request here. I'm going to go in there. What was it? I called it again. My memory is going. Change name, obviously, because we're changing the name. So change name, and I'm going to put in there the first name, which I'm going to put in there as Dave instead of David, and my last name I'll put in there as Dominic, which is my middle name. So if I click send on that, this isn't going to, oh, I need to make that a post, not as parameters. I really needed them. That was very silly. I meant to put those in the body. So let me just do that. Okay, so now I've got the API, which is change name. I've got the body there, and this isn't going to work because I haven't put the token in yet, but just for completeness, I'll do that. And it will say invalid token, which is what we want. If I go back to this one here, which gave us the last token that we got, I'm going to copy this token, big old string of nonsense, and I'm going to go into the headers here, and I'm going to add in a header called token, which I'm going to put in there, and now I'm going to click send on that. And it's still going to say invalid token, which is very, very interesting. Duh. And I wasn't getting the autocomplete because I wasn't within the function. So request.headers.token. So there we go. First little bug sorted. If I click on that now, we now get no errors and no data, and everything worked, and we can see that the token came through absolutely fine. So there was a little bug there to fix. But now if I look in the users table and I refresh that, it will say Dave Dominy, not David Fowler. So what we've done there is we've created the function or the API call to get the token. We've also got an API call here to change the name, which I use an example, which uses the token. So we basically check the token and get back a user ID. If the user ID is 0, we return false, and we've already handled sending back invalid token. And the check token function, which is exported to be able to be used in other modules, also calls this get user ID from token. If the user ID is 0, then it replies saying invalid token, or it returns the user ID, or 0 if it's invalid. So now we've got that token mechanism sorted out. We can use that to authenticate between the front end and the back end without them having to supply a username and password all the time. And this changed name here can then be adapted at a later stage to be able to change all sorts of other details. You know, if you've got some sort of account details page where the people might want to change their email address, and you know, you're going to want a function or an API call that's something like this. So that's a good example there. And I think that's enough for this video. But yeah, we've moved on quite a bit in this. In the next one, I'm probably going to add some extensions to what data you can save with it. So I might want to be able to save key value pairs, or maybe some sort of JSON objects. I'll have a think about how I want to do it, but we're going to add in, because people, when they sign up to a website, they might want to add in some profile information like a description or you know, have their website and other bits and pieces. So you want a place where you can save information about people without it being strictly kept to the columns of a set MySQL table. So we're going to do that next. But until then, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, please share, and all of that. I know this is a niche market thing. And please Google or search on YouTube for 2020 Rendezvous. It's something that me and some friends made, and I'm very proud of it. So thank you very much.